Welcome everybody to the PHUSE webinar Wednesday. This is our agenda for today. So I'm Sangeeta Bhattacharya. I'm the PHUSE Membership Director, and I welcome you all, and I'll give you a PHUSE board update. Next speaker is Michael Harris. He'll talk to us about the PHUSE EU Connect chair experience and give us a summary of the EU Connect. Next, we'll hear from Jean-Marc, and he'll talk about give us a summary of the Data Transparency and EMA Discussion Club. Next, we'll hear from Renu Shukla, who will give us a data engineering and project update. And last but not the least, we have Umair Ijaz and Hanne, who will talk about best practices for submission of event adjudication data. So to start off the board update, I want to talk to you about the EU 2019 Connect that we just completed in Amsterdam. And it was a huge success thanks to all of the chairs, co-chairs, presenters, participants, and of course the PHUSE office. And Michael is going to talk a little bit more on that. So look forward to hearing his summary. We wanted to remind you that our next big event is the PHUSE US Connect 2020, which is for which the registration is open. And the sponsorship and exhibitor opportunities are still available. And if you haven't booked your hotel, please go and register because the hotels are being sold out. It's in sunny Florida, in SeaWorld, so excellent venue, and we look forward to your participation. Wanted to remind you guys of the Computational Science Symposium, the PHUSE CSS, which will be in Silver Springs, right? Like every year. The registration will open in early 2020. We have sponsorship opportunities available. A few reminders of the single-day events in December. We have it in Durham, North Carolina on 5th December, and we have it in Tokyo, Japan on 10th December. We have some updates from the working groups. We are looking for a working group lead for educating for the future. The working group co-leads are critical in providing leadership to the working group, supporting the delivery of the active projects, and in contributing to the wider efforts of the PHUSE working groups. To perform this role successfully, you will need to be able to commit to attending the monthly steering committee meetings and supporting its activities, as well as help contribute to the running of the Computational Science Symposium, which takes place in June in Silver Spring, Maryland, US. We ask that all applicants interested in this role provide a brief summary of how you feel you can contribute to driving this working group forward. And if you are interested, please contact working groups at phuse.eu. The SEND dataset QC Best Practices project is looking to develop recommendations for stakeholders for efficient and effective SEND QC practices. In order to explore the variety of QC procedures and tools among different stakeholders, the team are asking members to participate in a short survey, and this survey will close by the end of November. Our next webinar will be 11th December. Agenda and registration emails will follow, so look out for that. We do ask you to sign up for our blogs for all the latest news and interesting blogs and discussions that are out there. You can find out more about the events, the working groups, and memberships on the blogs. So please make them a success. And to end, I just had a request that if you have any questions, please enter it in the questions box. Thank you. Now I hand it over to Mike.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Sangeeta. So, where do I start? It was a remarkable conference. sort of looking back, sort of as the dust settles, sort of I can look back with pride over those 4 days of the EU Connect. It ran from the 10th to the 14th of November at the RAI Conference Centre in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. So I'm going to start off with some conference facts. So the attendance, you can see up there at 658, which was the third highest of a conference to date behind Edinburgh and Frankfurt. Presentation and posters, so 150 and 24 respectively. That was from the highest number of abstracts that we've ever received for a conference, just over 300. There were 3 exceptional, engaging keynote speakers, all data scientists in their respective fields. We had 4 contemporary hands-on workshops, all very well attended and received great feedback. The discussion club featured the EMA and they gave an update on Policy 70, which Jean-Marc will talk about shortly. The 3 new streams, the ones that I've been talking about in these webinars about being dual formatted. So we had traditional presentations and a hands-on session. That was in leadership and innovation, personal management and professional development. They went really well, really pleased with that. And lastly, there was the debut of the new PHUSE app, which was a great success. The activity channel had a similar feel to Facebook or LinkedIn, and the app promoted interaction through gamification. So it ended up being a case of people trying to get the most points, but it really was great fun. So I'm going to give a quick run through just over the 3.5 days. Hopefully I can sort of do it justice, but we'll see. Okay, so the conference kicked off on the Sunday evening with the presenters meeting. That gave the presenters and stream chairs the opportunity to finally meet, because obviously they've been working together for several months leading up to this. That worked out really well. And the highlight of the Sunday evening was the poster session, and that was the first of many networking opportunities, which was followed by the welcome event. Monday, I introduced Elsa Sotiradis, and she spoke about digital biology and gave some thoughts on the ethical implications of such advancements. She also spoke about the importance of moonshot thinking. So for those of you who were there, I'm sure this resonates. And for those of you who haven't come across that term before, please Google it. It's very interesting. Monday also showcased the hands-on session for personal management, which focused on the 9-box tool, and the professional development, which covered personal identity. Both sessions were a great success and received excellent feedback. We also had the discussion club, as I mentioned earlier, which Jean-Marc will talk about next. Monday night was the conference dinner, which took place at the NH Grand Hotel Kraspanowski. Very impressive building, very impressive location. It looked stunning from the inside. It was a great party atmosphere, great food, great time had by all. You'll see in some photos that I've lined up. The Tuesday was kicked off with Anne-Sophie, my co-chair, who will be the chair of EU Connect 2020. So she introduced Dr. Neil Stanley. He gave a riveting keynote on sleep and the ways of measuring it. It was an amusing presentation from an expert in sleep. He professes to decry the use of fancy titles, and his presentation covered what was on the tin. His talk was hilarious, entertaining, and controversial, and most loved it. Tuesday had the majority of the hands-on workshops, and I have to admit, the bar on these workshops just seemed to rise year on year. We also had an additional poster session, as well as the other streams. So on to Wednesday. So the keynote was Simon Shepherd, introduced by Stephen, who's the PHUSE founder and chairman of the board. He presented sort of delegate questionnaire data, which was completed prior to the conference, giving some illuminating insights. His analysis highlighted that we know that goals are important, yet we do not spend the time to set them. He analysed real-time data from the audience, which was fascinating, and walked through 72 hours of continuous data from 2 delegates. It was a dynamic and memorable presentation, and I discovered the true meaning of multitasking with an exercise where I had to come up onto the stage and perform some simple tasks. Simon then went on and explored key human performance indicators. And then to wrap up what seemed like a whirlwind 3.5 days, I did the closeout, and then Anne-Sophie gave an excellent introduction into EU Connect 2020, which will be in Liverpool, England. And my final slide is just some images of the conference. So for those of you there, just give you an opportunity to reflect on what happened. And for those of you who weren't there, as you can see, there was lots of fun had by all, especially in the evening social. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Jean-Marc.
Thank you, Michael, and congratulations on such an amazing conference. I think it really joins my top 3 with Budapest and Edinburgh, and I really look forward to Liverpool. So I will tell you about the data transparency workshop that we had with the EMA. It was well attended. I think we had a full room, probably about 40 to 50 people. It's not the first time that we have this type of interaction with EMA and with other regulators as part of our event. I think it's quite a critical time now to engage with regulators as things are changing in the landscape. So we started off with me giving an update and a status on the transparency from a regulator perspective, what the regulators have been doing, and we've also looked at synergies and differences. Anne-Sophie gave a presentation which was very much a status from the EMA in terms of where they are. She also touched upon a bit about the future. And we had about an hour for a panel discussion and Q&A with other experts. But just to set the scene, we started to look at what has happened in the recent years, especially coming from the regulators, and focusing on the last years, where we can see that not only EMA, who you could say started the transparency from the regulator perspective, but also Health Canada and FDA have been contributing with their own initiative. Health Canada just went live on 1st of April with their final guidance and policy on public release of clinical information. And FDA has just completed the public consultation on their industry pilot that was conducted earlier in 2018. The public consultation closed at the end of August, and we are still waiting to hear from the FDA on the next step. In the meantime, EMA Policy 70 paused last summer, I think it was August 2018, due to the relocation plan to Amsterdam and the business continuity plan that was put in place. And again, it's a pause button, it's not a stop button. And that's something that Anne-Sophie was very clear about. There is a very strong will at the EMA to restart Policy 70. It just hasn't been possible as of now. We've also discussed differences and synergies between those different policies and initiatives, even though they are not all effective right now. So the core, you could say, of the meeting was the presentation from Anne-Sophie. We are writing a blog about the whole session, and I hope we can share the slides in the coming weeks. But just to give you an update on the main points that she made, she gave us some figures about Policy 70 and what you can find on the website. There's about 142 procedures that have been published until the break. And as of today, there's about 458 procedures that are in the backlog. She also mentioned that as we go forward, there's about 10 or 12 procedures that are added every month to the backlog, which of course starts to be a lot. She also discussed the status of anonymization in the 142 procedures, and she did mention that about 80% of all procedures are still using redaction as the sole anonymization method. But now, in the last guidance that was published just before the break, it's more, the sponsors are more encouraged to document in the anonymization report why they are using redaction and put more justification. That's a discussion that is still going on, of course. And there was a lot of discussion also in the Q&A about redaction versus anonymization, qualitative versus quantitative risk, and so on. Something else that she talked about that was very interesting was about the collaboration with Health Canada. As some of you know, Health Canada has a similar policy in terms of requirements when it comes to anonymization in particular and scope. She discussed a pilot that they did with Health Canada on the DARSA-LEX procedure. That was in 2018 before the break. They went off, took the same procedure, made their own assessment of CCI and personal information in terms of what was done, and then went back and compared their findings and compared their feedback to see where they differ, where they align, and see in the future how they can align further on those kind of policies. The two other points that she made that were really interesting were about Health Canada that has a retrospective process around accessing clinical documents. That's not the case right now with policy 17, so it's only the case with policy 43. And she did mention that's something that EMA is also interested in looking into. And last but not the least, she discussed the Health Canada recognition process throughout EMA and also made it clear that EMA is interested to look at the mutual recognition process when it comes to Health Canada documents. So I think there was a lot of good news. It was quite interesting to see that the two regulators are working very closely on the same policy and the same documents are at stake. So we did have then a panel discussion with Anne-Sophie Henri-Eudes, with Lucas Quignola, who's a data sharing expert at Biogen and who's also a TAG member, Stephen Bamford, global head of data transparency at Janssen and who's also the PHUSE founder, and Kaeda Imam, who's a general manager at Privacy Analytics, professor at University of Ottawa and an EMA TAG member. So the audience could ask questions. I also asked questions that I've received prior to the workshop. And I'm just going to give some of the highlights. We're going to try to summarize all the discussions into a blog. But we did discuss again the policy 70 phase 1 backlog. As I said earlier, there's about 458 procedures in the backlog. Every month there's about 10 or 12 that are added. And the big question is when policy 70 restarts, which procedures we prioritize. Anne-Sophie actually asked the audience what they believe would be a fair criteria to use. Do we just go back in time and look at the first ones at the bottom of the backlog, and those ones are prioritized to go first, or can we define other criteria to prioritize procedures that maybe are more in the public interest or more likely to be used, and so on and so forth. We just discussed example, but we haven't come up with something that was more consensus in the audience. But at least I think it was really interesting that Anne-Sophie asked the question to the audience and made it clear that this is a two-way avenue. Something else that we discussed was the EMA Health Canada collaboration. She made it clear that there is a lot of discussions going on, which I think is very positive. There was one question around the fact that Health Canada seems to now push a lot more back on redaction than EMA has done in the past. And the question was very much to whether EMA regrets that they haven't pushed back harder on redaction and full redaction of narratives in particular. Anne-Sophie did say that the regulations in Europe and Canada are different, and that what Canada is able to do, what Health Canada is able to do in Canada is not necessarily the case. In Europe, they are not able to totally enforce transformations over redaction through the process, but of course that's their wish to see more transformation, anonymization versus sole use of redaction. The other topic that we discussed was the structure of documents and their contents when it comes to data transparency. So if we think about CSR, when they were written, they were not written in the concept of data transparency and being shared widely. And we discussed different initiatives to maybe write them differently, as well as all the documents in a way that when they need to be shared, they are easier to anonymize. Anne-Sophie made it clear that data transparency should not be the driver for writing those documents. Those documents should follow in priority the ICH guidelines, that EMA has been selecting different sections in the CSR and other documents to be in scope based on the content of those sections, not those sections as such. And what matters is is the content of those sections rather than anything else, so they can be used for secondary assessment. Some people in the panel did mention that indeed trying to be more consistent when it comes to writing personal information, such as direct or co-identifiers, could help anonymization. Is definitely something that companies should consider having as a practice. And we had a number of discussion on the topic, but the main feedback was like, we don't expect data transparency to fundamentally change the way documents are being created. The documents are created for reporting the study and down the line having the drug submitted, but data transparency is a secondary purpose when it comes to writing such documents. So it was quite interesting discussion. And last but not the least, we discussed phase 2 of Policy 70 and the sharing of individual patient data. So as you know, phase 2 is not effective. Phase 2 is only defined in the scope of Policy 70, but hasn't been defined in any precise way for now. And the first feedback from Anne-Sophie on this was like, first we need to restart phase 1. That's the main priority. Phase 2, you could say, would be a second priority afterwards, without giving any timelines. Some people in the panel did mention that, well, if you really want to make data transparency successful, you need to get to phase 2, because this is where most of the data utility is. Without phase 2, Policy 70 would be potentially limited. There was also discussions around the fact that many sponsors are already sharing individual patient data through different initiatives, and that if most sponsors are doing that at some point, is there really the need for phase 2? So there was a lot of discussion, but I think that the main point that Anne-Sophie made was that, well, if you know, when phase 2 when phase 2 is gonna be discussed, it's important to really think about how we can make phase 2 effective in a way that the data is actually used, and that we should really think carefully about how to make phase 2 a reality, and really look at the benefit and how to make the data the most useful possible. That was also, I think, a very interesting comment. There's been other topics discussed. We talked about collaboration with the FDA. We talked about who is accessing the CSR in Policy 70. We talked about what defines success of Policy 70 and other initiatives. Some people said that success will be defined if documents and data are being used for publications. People said that success will only be reached when phase 2 will be reached. Without phase 2, it can't be called a success. Anne-Sophie did say that, you know, having phase 1 in place was already a success. I mean, it's been the result of 4 or 5 years of work, starting in 2012, and having the first documents on the portal is already a success in itself. And that, of course, you know, there's more work to do, but we should not undermine all the work that has been done by both the regulators, but also the sponsors in making phase 1 a reality. So right now it's post, but there was definitely a strong will to restart it. So very exciting discussions, very good workshop. As I said, we will summarize all the discussions to a blog and make it public shortly. And before I pass on the baton to the next speaker, I wanted to say that this concludes a very exciting year for PHUSE and data transparency. We started to engage with regulators in 2015 when we were invited by EMA to contribute to the stakeholders meeting on Policy 70 external guidance. In 2016, our identification standard was referenced in Policy 70 external guidance. We also had the EMA participating remotely to the EU CSS in Basel. 2017, they came in person in London at the EU CSS, and we also had representation on Health Canada reference group on public use of clinical information. We started our collaboration with Health Canada then. 2018, we had the FDA coming to speak to us at the US CSS about their pilot and their initiative. And this year, we had the 3 regulators coming and participating into workshops or discussion clubs at the CSS earlier in June, and now at the EU Connect in Amsterdam. So that's really good that we've been able to speak with the 3 of them and engage with them in this open platform, and we hope to be able to continue in the future. And that was it. You're welcome to send me your questions, and I hope I'll be able to release the blog with others involved very soon. Thank you.
Hi, Lauren. Just to confirm, you can hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to present the updates regarding the data engineering project, which is part of the Educating for the Future working group under PHUSE. So why, just a little bit of context on why we've started this data engineering project. As most of you are aware, we're not necessarily collecting data just from ECRFs. Data is getting more complicated. We're getting large data, unstructured data. It's coming in various formats in non-traditional ways. So as part of this data engineering project, what we're striving to do is look at established data engineering approaches that have been used in other industries, and how can we leverage some of these approaches and these techniques in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's what we've been trying to do. And as this chart shows, the project started and kicked off in 2018. We had an overview paper that was presented at EU Connect last year. We established a Squarespace, and I'm going to showcase a little bit, browse through the Squarespace so you can get familiar with that. In 2019, we recruited new members to this sub-work group. This year has been a busy year. We've had multiple posters and presentations that have been created and presented at CSS, at the EU Connect. And then next year, we hope to continue recruitment of additional members. We already have a poster that has been accepted for the US Connect that Sangeeta alluded to. We also want to increase traffic to the Squarespace and have more people visit our sites and review our material. In this slide, I have some links to our data engineering project page. The presentation or the paper actually that was published in 2018 that was authored by our leads, and the link to our Squarespace. So I just wanted to also show that in real time here. This is our data engineering project overview, the wiki site. So I encourage all of you to come here, get some more information on the what we're doing, our membership, etc. And this is the Squarespace that I just mentioned. As you can see, there's a lot of tiles that you can go in and explore. Explore what is data engineering, thoughts on automation, industry standards, use cases from other industries. And we also are planning to populate learning paths here. So if you're looking to follow a well-defined learning path in the future, we hope to populate that. So these are, all these tiles contain materials that have been curated and posted here for others to learn from. And again, what are our ongoing efforts? As I mentioned, the Squarespace, you continue to populate that with relevant information pertaining to data engineering that's been curated by our team. We also hope to publish periodic blogs on data engineering related topics. And last but not the least, we are always looking for enthusiastic volunteers to join our team, explore data engineering topics and the applicability of these approaches to the pharma industry. So we're looking for anybody with experience, who's used something like the data lake concept, master data management, data warehousing, any of these different approaches out there? Have you, do you have experience applying these? Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? Because we can learn just as much from things that didn't work and those that worked as well. So we really are looking for folks to share their stories and help us, really shape the future and, be able to leverage all this good information. So again, big plug here. We need you. I have here the emails for Bev Hayes and Guy Garrett, who are the leads for the data engineering project. And again, really encourage you all to browse through our Squarespace and our wiki site to learn more. Thank you.
First, just check. Yes. Hi, Lauren, can you hear us?
Yep, we can hear you. If you could just put it into presenter mode, that would be great.
Good. Thank you. This is me, Umair. I'm a senior standard developer from Novo Nordisk. And with me, I have Hanne. She's a standard data standard specialist in Novo Nordisk. And today we are going to share news with you on we have a white paper soon to be published by PHUSE on the best practices for submission of event adjudication data. So just to give you a small background on it, actually it started from one of the PHUSE computational science symposium where in one of the sessions the question was raised, as regulatory authorities are more and more looking into the event adjudication data, and the requirements are actually increasing. So is there any standard way of collecting and submitting this data? And we had a very good discussion over there, and then it was proposed to add as an agenda item into the PHUSE STTM and ADAM frequently asked question project. So from there, actually, it started back in 2018, and then we formed a team, the PHUSE project of the STTM ADAM frequently asked questions. And we have actually very diverse team. There were members from CDISC, FDA, a lot of from the industry like Novartis, GSK, DCRI, Merck, and many others. So we actually try to find out what are the things already available for this. So just as a background, I think if there are new people who does not know about the event adjudication, so the event adjudication process actually is applied across the different therapeutic areas wherever there is a need for independent evaluation of the important endpoints. So that is the usual definition of event adjudication process. And then we try to actually look into, is there any standard way of collecting or representing this is available? So we found out actually the CDISC therapeutic area guidelines have actually discussed this question, but it was not in detail enough that it can be used in a standardized way. So we also try to find out further whether we should submit it into STTM or ADAM or in both. What would be the preferred way of doing it? So in that discussion, actually, we had a lot of questions that we have to answer, and that Hanne is going to answer in the next slide, that we call it as a scope. So in the scope, we have answered the questions that we thought are needed to answer this. Yeah.
The first question we discussed was, can the same data structure be generalized across the different therapeutic areas? And the short answer is yes. because the therapeutic area should, on general level, not affect the structure of the STM data and ADAM data. The same basic information will be captured for whatever event type or whatever disease we are performing adjudication on. And then within that specific therapeutic area, there should be a possibility for adding disease-specific assessments. So that is the model we were looking into. That was the first question we asked ourselves. The next question was, what level of detailed data should be submitted? If you're not that familiar with event location, then just a little background is that for event location, there is very often 2 or more adjudicators looking at the same event and giving their individual assessments independent. So we at least get 2 answers, you could say, for a specific event. And if they don't agree, the requirement is that they have to agree. So they have to meet, they have to discuss, they have to come somehow to a final conclusion. So sometimes we have even 3 different opinions where the last one is the conclusive opinion. So we ask ourselves, do we need to submit all the details from each of the adjudicators? And it took a lot of time, but based on the experiences in the working group, we have concluded that every individual adjudicator's assessments should be submitted. But it should be clear from the data set with a flag or something, what is the conclusive final assessment for that event. So what should be the standard structure for such a data set or several data sets to ensure the traceability of event and ease the regulatory authority reviewing the adjudicated data? There we had very good input from the regulatory authorities who are used to review these data. And they say, and based on the technical conformance guide, the suggestion from this group is that reporting event adjudication data in a separate domain will ensure these data are clearly separated from the investigator-reported data. It might be the same assessment we ask investigator to give his opinion on, that we also ask the adjudicator to give his opinion on. So it has to be clearly identified from whom we get this assessment. And there we think a separate domain is the way out of this. But how should the investigator-reported assessments and adjudicator assessments be presented to be clearly differentiated and easily identifiable, else than having different domains? It is critical to create a link from the source, that means investigator reporting, to the adjudication outcome. So therefore, the serifs and the data structure should be designed in a way that ensures full traceability, especially now when the assessment from investigators and from adjudicators are split into different domains. This link is very important. And then the final question we ask ourselves, should data be submitted both in STM and in ADAM? And it was very good to have all the members from the industry in this working group, because we got different inputs. But the final conclusion we came to was that we would recommend that these data are submitted both in STM and in ADAM.
To ensure the standardization, and I think we have some time, so it is better if we also show the data set that we kept as an background information. So if we can just...
In the white paper, we have written some... It is there.
It is there?
It is there.
Good.
Yeah. Just, yeah. We have come with some suggestions or example data, how it could look. So the light blue is assessments from the first primary adjudicator. The dark blue are assessments from the second primary adjudicator. So you can see the suggested domain is EA, Event Identification Assessments. And there you can see we put them as assessments and the result in the EA ORAS. So for the first one, it's an acute myocardial infarction that they are adjudicating. And they give us the onset day, they think this acute myocardial infarction was starting. They give us some details for it in third line and fourth line. And then they also confirm whether full documentation was available when they did this assessment. In the supplemental qualifiers for this domain, the source of this event should be placed, because this is kind of background or metadata for the event. Who actually found the event, you could say. And it's directly reported as an AE from or endpoint from investigator. Yeah. This one.
Good. Thank you. So this was just an overview. So now we should actually think based upon the proposed domain EA you just saw. So we expect that the standard developer organization would develop actually a standard based upon these recommendations. But until we have that, these best practices that we have described in our white paper, they can be used. So we actually have a standardized way to submit the data to the authorities. Yes, and with that note, we'll really like to thanks PHUSE for giving us an opportunity to actually work upon this topic and develop a standard way of actually collecting and submitting the data. And special thanks to the CDs, regulatory authorities, and all the participants actually we had from across the industry. So this was a really nice experience, and soon the white paper will be published. And if you guys have any questions, please look into the paper, and you are welcome to contact the working group if you have any questions. The contact details are also present in the paper. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So I've just had a question come through for you, actually. It says, in some cases, have multiple adjudications, and then if not resolved, this would go to panel. How would this be shown?
Yeah, that is also present in the white paper, but I decided not to present it in the slide deck here because it's a little more complicated. Yeah. But all the assessments from each round this event goes through should be shown in the dataset. That is the recommendation from the group.
Yeah, but probably we have some time now, so I will like to utilize, probably we can utilize it. So if the question actually they ask, it is covered in our white paper.
It could be a situation where an event goes through primary adjudication, conclusion is found, and then new source data is uploaded or found, sent for adjudicators, and new source data will require new adjudication or re-adjudication.
Yeah. So can you see the table now?
No, we can see the presentation.
You can see the presentation.
Only, not the...
You can't see a Word file on the...
We can see the event adjudication assessments on the presentation slide.
Yeah, can you see yellow color on the slide?
No.
No, you can only see the presentation. Okay. But in the white paper, we actually have a table showing how we suggest to present if an event needs more than 2 primary adjudicators evaluating it.
Yes, so we would recommend actually go into the paper and look at, there are actually 3 scenarios. One is the basic scenario, just telling when we have adjudicator 1 and adjudicator 2, if they have the same conclusion, then how the data should be represented. If they don't agree and then the conclusion goes to the event adjudication committee, then how the results should be represented. And then after that, actually, even if we have a case of re-adjudication where the adjudicator gets some further data and they have to re-evaluate the stuff, then in that case, how the data should be presented. So all of these scenarios are covered into the paper. So please go and look into that. And if you have any questions, you are most welcome to contact us.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? We'll just give it another minute or so and wait for those to come through. Whilst we're waiting, just to remind you all that our next webinar will be December the 11th and this will be a wrap up of the year, and then what we can look forward to for the year 2020.
Good.
Okay, thanks everyone for attending.